in silence with an eating disorder. Now she's using social media campaign against diet culture and society's obsession with thinness.
Quick note that some of the next discussion might be upsetting and sensitive to some people. Alex, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you. And you have been, listen, if anyone knows you from social media, you are so open and it's amazing what you do, but you have been through so much because you talk about being very aware of your body, its shape and its size from a very young age, Alex.
I was, and I actually think that's a story for most of us as well, for a lot of us as well. But from a really young age, I started trying to change my body, and I felt like I needed to fix it. I became aware that it wasn't the norm. I was kind of curvier than my peers, and I felt like I needed to fix it. And that really just marked the beginning of a really long relationship and troubled relationship with food, eating, my body. And I started yo-yo dieting, which led to disordered eating. And ultimately, I was diagnosed with an eating disorder then in my late 20s. It was a long time.
Yeah.
Do you remember when somebody first commented on your body?
You know, I do, and it's someone that's really close to me, and he's since apologized for it. But my nickname was Pretty But Plump. And, you know, as you can imagine, but is a negative word, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, so plump is a bad thing. So I'm too big. And I think that actually was quite seminal. It was quite formative, that nickname that really stuck with me. I was like, I don't want to be plump.
What age were you, Alex?
I think I was probably about 12.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing that I think an awful lot of people who are in secondary school are like, oh, I got a name like that. You know, there was a lot, like when we were growing up, it was the butterface thing. You know, like all of this kind of stuff was going around. It's insane when you look back at it. You stayed in an industry, you became a fashion and beauty journalist, and you already had disordered eating. Did that exacerbate the situation?
Totally, because I mean, we already live in a world, don't we, that really idolizes thinness, is obsessed with being thin, and vilifies fatness. You know, we're scared of being fat, and we dehumanize people that live in bigger bodies. But all of this is really magnified in the fashion industry because designers, you know, didn't, and still to an extent don't cater really for women above a size 12 to 14, which is kind of shocking which is very shocking when you consider that the average UK woman is a size 16, and only very thin models historically, and to an extent now as well, have been considered good enough to model clothes. And I worked within the fashion industry as well, and a lot of the narrative, so much of the narrative within the industry revolves around being thin and how to be thin and how to stay thin, and all of that really seeped into me and just further affected how I saw my body. I already felt that I needed to be thin, but that made me feel like I needed to be thinner than ever.
I can imagine with the job that you had, it made it even more difficult attending these glitzy parties, interviewing celebrities. When did you realise and know that something was really wrong?
Gosh, I think it took me a really long time. It actually took me my mum. It was all going on for years and years and years, and I was kind of, and again, I'm glad you did like a little content warning at the top, because this is obviously like really triggering to, you know, for some people to listen to. But I was getting thinner and thinner, and my eating disorder was getting bigger and bigger. But I couldn't see it. I didn't see it. I was still like living this life that, you know, that everyone around me thought was really glamorous, but I was troubled and I was struggling badly, and everything around me was suffering, my social life and my personal life. And it was my mum actually who stepped in and said, we need to get you some help. And I mean, that was the start of it, but it still took a while from there. It took a while because I was in denial for a really long time. But that was the start of it. And that was where the seed was sown for me. And I was like, okay, maybe something's wrong.
And Alex, I'm just wondering, because as of last year, eating disorders are the main reason that children in Ireland are admitted to psychiatric care. It is, we've been talking about it for so long, but it just seems to be getting worse and worse. And you were in your 20s when something kind of clicked with you. So did that care, how does that deprogramming take place?
I mean, this is the scary thing, is that it's difficult to access and maintain access to, sustained therapy. That's really difficult because of cost, and it's not possible for everyone, especially with, our healthcare systems. But I was lucky enough to have that, and I was able to have therapy and for a long time. And because I think, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, that's what it needs. That's what eating disorder needs, is really prolonged therapy over a really long time. Because, I mean, the recovery stories that we see online or on TV, where it's like person gets sick, person gets help, recovers, is not necessarily like that. It can be a really long road, and it's not linear either. There are so many ups and downs and backwards and forwards. And I think that's a really important thing for anyone listening that's struggling to realize, is that it can be really long and hard, but so worth it.
What treatment did you get? Whenever your mum even said to you, you need help, what did she mean? For people who are watching on, how can they deal with this?
So obviously the first port of call would be your GP, which is where my mum took me to my GP, and then I was referred to a psychiatrist who diagnosed me, and then referred me onto a psychologist, and some inpatient treatment, which is where it all began. But yeah, for anyone listening, definitely go to your GP first and explain everything, and don't hold back, and just insist on help.
Yeah, and anyone can go to virginmedia.ie/helplines if they're looking for any helplines this morning. And Alex, it's also important to say that eating disorders, people come in all shapes and sizes when it comes to eating disorders. Now you threw yourself full force into body positivity, and you really opened yourself up online. Did that take a lot? Because we all know with being positive comes trolling.
Yeah, it took a lot. I mean, before that, I was actually on Instagram before I opened up about eating disorders and body, and I was doing fashion and beauty. And it was when my eating disorder was at its peak, and I was editing all of my photos. And I downloaded Photoshop before any of these editing apps existed, and I learned how to like shape my body and give myself a jawline and all these horrible things, like these awful things. And the pictures of me didn't even look like pictures. It wasn't even me anymore, what I was uploading. So to pivot from that to talking about eating disorders and leaning into like self-acceptance and body confidence was a huge step. But the moment I just sort of dipped my toe in it, and the response that I got, I realized this is a huge issue. So many of us feel bad about our bodies, and I need to do this more than anything. And it really became like an overnight sort of passion for me, for lack of a better word.
It's amazing. And listen, your positivity is spreading because you are a Sunday Times bestseller with your book. You've got an incredibly popular podcast, Should I Delete That, with M. Clarkson, talking about diet culture as well. There's something in it you talk about, and I haven't heard about this before, Almond Moms. What are Almond Moms?
Right, so an almond mom. So it's kind of it's become a bit of a social media phenomenon, this, but the term almond mom was coined by Yolanda Hadid on an episode of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, where her daughter Gigi Hadid, who we all know, the famous supermodel, rang her and said, "I'm feeling, really weak." She'd been on a diet, and her mum said, "Just have a couple of almonds and chew them really slowly." So that was kind of where Almond Moms came about, the definition of it, but the term. But the definition is a mum who kind of projects her own disordered eating habits onto her children and sort of participates in behaviours disguised as health and wellness and discipline, but are actually really just diet behaviours. And for an example would be, a mum who says, "Are you sure you want to eat that?" Or "You're not hungry, you're just bored, or you're just thirsty, and just have a few almonds if you're hungry." Or a mum who constantly discusses calories and calorie counting in front of their children. But it's so important to know, and we've just done a podcast episode all about this, but it's so important to note that all of this stems from their own issues around body, food, body image and food anxieties, and they are just a culture of their own environment as well. So I think while it's important to talk about Almond Mums, it's really important to have compassion as well for that generation and what they were subject to as well, because it was just as brutal as what we were subject to.
Those episodes of Real Housewives, they were wild watching it. You're like, what is she going on about?
Wild.
The book is called You Are Not a Before Picture. It's an incredible title, by the way, and a great book. And Should I Delete That podcast, where yourself and Em Clarkson take on the multi-billion euro industry that is diet culture. Fair play to you, Alex Light. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lovely chatting.